Welcome. This is Chaumtoli Huck, and I'd like to welcome everyone to 2016 Justice in Review. For those of you who may not be familiar with Law at the Margins, Law at the Margins is an online innovative platform focused on law and social justice, focused here on the United States, as well as showing solidarity with social justice movements around the world. Up until this year, our work has been primarily online digital through these webinars. This year, we have moved forward and began to connect with grassroots organizers and providing legal support work to that. And we hope to do more of that in 2017. So enough of Law at the Margins. This town hall is really about you, our participants, and we're excited to hear from you about what you're doing in your area and how we might sort of work across our silos. In fact, that was one of the questions from one of our town hall participants. Before I hand it over to Victor Narro, who's the project director at UCLA Labor Center, also a board member at Law at the Margins, I'm going to just go through some of the logistics with you. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a a chat box. Please use that as a way to communicate with us and let us know your reactions to what you're hearing, if you're not hearing. Below the video screen, you'll see 3 boxes: question, topics, polls. If you have any questions or topics that you want to address or you want to talk about, type it up. You click on the dialog box and you can write it there so we can see what you're thinking and what you'd like to address. The polls ask, the first question is, what are some of the pressing social justice issues from 2016? The goal of today is to look back, take the lessons learned to deepen our engagement and our struggle for 2017. So as a beginning, as I turn it off to Victor to give us a little bit of the flashpoints of 2016, I encourage each of you to introduce yourself by typing and using the chat box on the side. Let us know if you would like to speak and share a minute about your work. The agenda is that we'll hear from Victor, then we'll invite each of you to share a little bit about your work, have a discussion, and then close in about sort of 90 minutes. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Victor, but please, participants, welcome. And use the chat box on the right-hand side to chat with me and to introduce yourself, your name we have, but your organization and the areas that you would like to share on. So turn it over to Victor.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you again for joining us today. And I think it's always important to connect across different parts of the social justice movement to reflect on this year, and then also looking forward to next year. I know we've been doing a lot of reflections lately in light of what happened with the elections. So I think people are already in the reflecting stage, but it's also, you know, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty about what's coming ahead and what challenges there lie before us. But I think it's important to reflect on this year, the accomplishments and the challenges. And again, my name is Victor Narro from the UCLA Labor Center, and what I'm going to do is give you kind of my sense of what, from my perception, what some of the highlights this year, and then I'm going to open it up because I think this is where we learn from each other and we invite different perspectives and viewpoints. Most of my work is with labor rights, and you know, I think in the labor movement, worker justice movement, we have accomplished a lot when we think in terms of minimum wage fights. There's been a lot of organic organizing with fast food workers. Major cities around the country, worker centers and labor unions have been joining together to pass minimum wage. We have the $15 minimum wage in Los Angeles, and now we're implementing a minimum wage. But we're also, addressing issues that impact low-wage workers. I also do a lot of work on immigrant rights, and my work with immigrant rights has really been focused on stopping the deportation. So the Obama administration has launched this deportation machine that we've been fighting against for the last 7 years. Almost 2.5 million immigrants have been deported under this administration. And we've been fighting hard to stop that deportation machine. And we see the same kind of challenge with Donald Trump, who's actually going to advance it. And then also, there's issues of racial justice in this country. And I think a lot of folks can weigh in on that as well. We're trying to be supportive of how to fight the injustice that exists in the criminal justice system, especially the targeting of people of color, especially young people. And that's what the work with Black Lives Matter, the intersectionality with them, and also other youth organizing efforts is very important, because we also want to stop the criminalization of young people in this country. I also want to share that Natasha Licio is a friend of mine. She's actually the president of the National Lawyers Guild. She's with the Pro-Def in New York Associate Council. I'm very proud that she's our president, because I'm also executive committee on the National Lawyers Guild in the LA chapter. But she's not able to join us today, so I was going to read some reflections from her, and then I'm going to open it up to the folks who have joined us. She talked about the attack on people of color, and this is trying times for the attack. It's the most trying times than ever before for the attacks of people of color, immigrants, Muslim, people with disabilities. How do we move forward to protect them and move forward with a vision of justice, grounded in human rights and dignity? This is going to be very challenging, because not just the attack on these communities by corporate America, but it's going to be it's going to further become more challenges, because we will see a lot of policies with the Trump administration that's going to target different communities of color. Puerto Rico, I grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood in New York, and I really developed a lot of a strong connection with the Puerto Rican community. And we all know what's happened in Puerto Rico. It's the oldest country in the Western Hemisphere, and the deepening of colonialism that's been happening this year. It seems like the United States government, with their federal policies, is going to make Puerto Rico more of a colony of the United States. And what we can do to bring solidarity to the people in Puerto Rico who are fighting against that type of injustice. And then Cuba. The President Obama has opened the doors to dialogue and openness with Cuba to get rid of some of the richest policies that the United States has engaged in against that country for the past 50 years. What lies ahead for Cuba under this new president, and how we can show solidarity with the Cuban people? But then those are my thoughts. I'm just gonna, and those are the thoughts of Natasha. Thank you again, Natasha, who's not able to join us. I'm gonna now open it up to welcome Sakia Afin to talk a little bit about Islamophobia and some of the struggles that's happening today. So, Sakia?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I can hear you.
So thank you, Victor and Chaumtoli, for this platform. This is really a nice space to be able to share with like-minded activists. And I just wanted to bring up the issue of Islamophobia that's happening in the United States, and not necessarily since yesterday, right? This has been crawling up on us since 2000. What we are experiencing now is merely the normalization of it, and in many cases, legalization of the discrimination against Muslim people in the United States. Since last year, the FBI has reported an alarming increase of hate crimes against Muslim community members from different countries, different language backgrounds, and in different parts of the United States. And in the last 6 to 8 weeks, we have seen an unprecedented number of events, and those are very shocking, not just in numbers, but the manners that they're happening, right? Very open public spaces, people are being called names, people's headscarves are being pulled. I just saw a video in New York Post. A woman was being kicked on her neck, and she fell through the stairs. So this is very shocking situation. the increase and the depth of what's happening. But coming back to Victor's point, we are going to look back to the whole year and talk about some of our accomplishments too. So in terms of accomplishment, I first want to mention that for the first time in a major political space, the humanity of Palestinian people was mentioned. The humanity was recognized. Their struggle for liberation was mentioned, and thanks to Bernie Sanders, lot of the social justice folks have felt at home that yes, these are the issues that I care about. And he also talked about Islamophobia in large forums and very openly from the beginning. I think he was the first politician that objected to the president-elect's comment about the Muslim community. So definitely that was an accomplishment. The second accomplishment, I think, was the engagement of Muslims from all walks of life in many states, especially in Newark. It was very visible. North Carolina, even in San Francisco Bay Area, very visible political engagement of the Muslim, both the Muslim leaders and the Muslim general population, which I think is an accomplishment. And the third thing I want to mention, it's going back to what's happening, what is the negative trend that we are seeing now, is rising up against that negativity. It seems like not just people of Muslim faith, it's all over. People from all faith and all different social justice groups are coming together. Sitting here in San Francisco Bay Area, we have almost 1 or 2 events happening every other day. And we see that there is a lot of solidarity and outrage within the population because of the maltreatment. So I think in terms of accomplishment, that's what we got, but now we are getting into a scary phase as we move on to the next year, and let's get back to that discussion after some time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we look forward to continuing to work together, but thank you for sharing that. I want to bring up Michelle Flores if she's available. Is Michelle, Michelle Flores is from Workers United, which is actually the union that owns the building where I work at the Downtown Labor Center. A great union. She's an organizer. She's also doing great organizing work with the nail salon workers. Is Michelle able to come on?
So let me just let our viewers know that, and maybe Zakia can share, because she just, I send you invite to come onto the screen. So if you could accept the invite, then we can hear you on the screen. Or the best way to, you would need a microphone. You don't necessarily need to have a video. So if you do want to share what you're doing, please, I encourage you to do that. So some of the questions that maybe I'll take this moment, Michelle Flores indicates that she doesn't have a microphone. But one of the questions that has come up, and maybe Victor or Zakia can address this, is around immigrant women specifically. That's one. And then the second is, we're in all of our silos. I do labor work, gender work, climate work, and how do we work across our issue areas to show solidarity? And here I want to add in something that was said by Natasha Bannon, which she said is, we need to look at international solidarity in the face of what the next 4 years will bring, and infuse not only into our political spheres policy, but we need to develop an anti-imperial lens, think about transnational feminism, anti-racism, and workers' movements globally. So, so anyway, it's a lot to process, but I was wondering if Victor and Zakia can comment on that. And in the meantime, I encourage folks to either use the chat box to share your ideas. Even if you don't have a microphone, I can read them out, or accept the invitation to be on screen. I know this can't be a shy bunch. All right.
you want to, Zakia, you want to go first?
Okay, so I have been working with immigrant women for the past 10 years. I work specifically with a very vulnerable group, victims of domestic violence. And from that lens, I can tell you that for immigrant women, it has always been very difficult being part of the mainstream society, taking advantage of the system that is in place, and even getting out when they are being victims of any kind of violence, not just domestic violence, right? So it has been very difficult for them all along. And now in the climate that we are in, the difficulties seem to be rising. The challenges now are manifold. There are some challenges which are system-based. For example, language access is a huge issue. I know that we don't really think about it as a social, within the context of social justice movement, but if you work with any immigrant population, it really becomes clear that language access is the very basic right that we need to make sure before we can invite people in integrating them in the mainstream society. So that struggle is there. Even sitting in Santa Clara County, where 25% of the population is Asian, it's a challenge for us to get an interpreter. So many times the court cases will be rescheduled because they couldn't find anybody. And when they find anybody, there is no systematic way of quality control. Is this interpreter actually doing the best that can be done in this language? Is this interpreter even trained on ethics and professionalism and whatnot, right? So those are very ground level challenges that we see. But in terms of policies, we have experienced a lot of hurdles when we are trying to do the visa petitions. I know that many of you will absolutely recognize the Violence Against Women Act that give victims of violence certain rights of immigration and certain benefits. They can work, they can get some public benefits and survive in this very expensive country. And so now with the new administration coming in and all these open hostility towards the immigrant community, we are kind of really nervous, and we are watching to see what's going to come of it. What are the main immigration categories that are going to be affected, or is everything going to be affected? At this point, we are kind of like in a blank space, but we are preparing with whatever information and knowledge base that we have.
Thank you. Just to build upon what you said, I always find we are very siloed in the movement, and my work is mostly immigrant rights and labor, workplace justice rights issues. I think when you're siloed, we make assumptions, and I think this happens to a lot of us that focus on one particular area, and we get so entrenched in our silos that we make assumptions now about other parts of the movement, and also we make cultural assumptions. So I think this is maybe the opportunity for us to dismantle those silos, engage in the process of learning more about each other. For example, I want to learn more about Islam and the religion of Islam. So it's not just having solidarity with our Muslim brothers and sisters. It's for me to really learn about the spirituality and the religion of Islam. And I think that will make me then a better advocate for the issues that they struggle with. Language is another example, and then cultural. We have to have cultural fluency with each other. So I think this is the opportunity not to dismantle our silos and see ourselves as part of a broader movement, because I think everybody's under attack. There's no one part of the movement that's not going to be under attack by this next administration. So those are my thoughts. So thank you, Zakia, for sharing those words with us.
Great. Sorry, at this moment, it seems like a lot of folks are either shy or maybe their devices are not allowing for them to be invited on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some of the things that they've been typing, and I appreciate each of you for doing that. Just a little to let you know that those who've joined on, I see Christopher Cox joined on, and he's doing a campaign around global labor solidarity. And would love to hear your thoughts and send an invitation to join onto the screen or use the chat box and I can read it. You do need to have a camera and mic on your device, and you do, Google Chrome is the best platform for this. So I apologize if you don't have that, but we're organizers, and so we know how to get your voices heard regardless. Michelle Flores responds to the solidarity question. One way I think we can infuse our movements with a transnational feminist analysis is to incorporate and push for more popular education work. She talks about Workers United. The organizers developed a 6-week curriculum that immigrant women they work with shared with each other in their homes. So, so I would love to hear more about that curriculum and also a little bit more about, what were those conversations. So thank you, Michelle. We also have Lena Houston, and she writes, I'm reminded of the Audre Lorde quote, there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. Yeah, I think that there are many beautiful quotes from Audre Lorde for those of us who are movement folks. And Lena Houston is the director of campus and community programs at a nonprofit called If, When, How, and Lawyering for Reproductive Justice. And again, Christopher Cox says he doesn't have a camera, but maybe you can type in your thoughts. I thought maybe either of you can share a little bit about reproductive rights, because that is something that is kind of going to be, is already, at least in Ohio, under attack. And, what are some ways in which we can make the reproductive rights or reproductive justice part of kind of the broader conversation? It seems to me we have a lot of focus on immigrant rights and Islamophobia, but we know also that in the United States, the election of Trump is also a big blow to the issues of women's issues. Victor or Zakia or anybody else would like to sort of address specifically reproductive justice, and I invite Lena as well if you to either join in and speak or to continue to share your thoughts on the chat. So Victor,
Zakia,
yeah.
you wanna address that first, Zakia?
Okay, I'll go first. Again, I'll go back to the population group that I work with, immigrant women, and definitely reproductive right is coming under attack for some time. Again, this is not something new that just appeared at our door yesterday. This has been going on, but I feel that immigrant women are particularly vulnerable. And one of the examples that I can think of is the case of Pierogi Patel. I'm hoping that many of you have heard about this case where an Indian American woman was sentenced to 20 years of jail for miscarrying her child. So there are a lot of different narratives of what actually happened, but this law in I think it's in Indiana, and the law has only been applied that for this, the Indian American woman, and before her, for a Chinese woman, the 20 year of these laws' existence. And it has never been applied before. The Chinese woman was being punished because she tried to commit suicide, and because of that, she miscarried her child. So where the mother is potentially putting the fetus in danger, then the mother is being held as criminally liable. And this law is in existence not just in Indiana. There are a few other states that have similar provisions. And then there are a few other states that are coming up with a new concept of banning the sex-selective abortion. I'm sure many social justice movement folks have heard about this, and this is targeted towards the Asian community, and the reasoning for coming up with this idea that we have to ban abortions that are being done solely because of selecting the sex of the child. The bills mention the country reports from India and China mention them specifically and tries to ban them. So in California, in a state like California, where Democrats are the majority in the state legislature, this bill keeps coming up every few years. And right now in the US, there are 11 states that has already made this law. So this is just, the activists like to call it wolf in sheep's clothing. So this is another way of getting at an abortion ban, and just starting with the most vulnerable population. And what is happening in Ohio, what was being tried in Ohio, and my fear, and I think many of the reproductive justice movement folks share this fear, that in the coming years we will see more and more attacks on reproductive rights in general, and specifically towards the most vulnerable groups like Asian women.
Great. Victor, do you want to?
Yeah, I just want to, thank you so much, and I'll go first next time, Sakia. So I don't call you first, but I think this is one area where it's going to be a challenge. The challenge is on us now, because I think, like, I really myself haven't done much work in the area of reproductive rights, because I've been focusing mostly on workplace justice and immigrant rights, when you think in terms of like policy work, like legalization and fighting deportations. But I think we're going to have like, this is what legal advocates are going to have to play an important role to kind of dismantle these legislation and these policies in other states. They do disguise themselves as something that they're not, and really what they want to do is attack women's rights on these issues about abortion and reproductive rights. And we need to have lawyers engage in a thoughtful policy, and then we just need to create a broad agenda how to fight and push back. Because I think we're at the time period now where if we give up something, whether it be an issue related to reproductive rights or immigrant rights, we give up something, it's going to come back on all of us. And I think this is the approach we've got to take with this next incoming administration, that it's got to be like all the different parts of the movement got to be on an equal level. We have to fight for each one on the same level, and we cannot give in to any particular area of work, because I think once we start to do that, then they begin to dismantle the entire framework of social justice. This is where we need to be more united than ever before.
So at this point, I wanted to just highlight that Kwara Kekana, she's from Johannesburg, South Africa, had sent a message which I put onto the chat line regarding work on BDS, which is boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, and Palestinian rights and land issues. So I wonder, so I definitely want to encourage and thank her for sending that message. And for those of you who may not have had a mic or a computer, you're welcome to just record a 1-minute message, and we'll upload that onto theMargins. Part of it is to lift up grassroots voices. And so one of the things that she talks about, just to shift away from America, is the successes that they've had in South Africa and outside of the U.S. and European countries to actually accept and adopt rights of Palestinians. And for those of us who do work in the United States, we've kind of gone in the reverse direction. In New York specifically, some of you may know that Governor Cuomo has passed legislation to almost penalize anyone who vendors who take on a view that's supportive and aligned with BDS. Similarly, at New York City, even though New York City is such a progressive city, that there's a resolution and a hearing. In the midst of the polarized election, there was a resolution, again, sort of condemning a strategy that's being used kind of to support Palestinian rights. So we're going to see a lot of these actions to suppress unpopular viewpoints and unpopular positions. And so I'm just wondering if, and even when we hosted, Law at the Margins hosted a webinar on solidarity, an intersectional solidarity with around oppressed folks, including Palestinians, not just Palestinians, even amongst the progressive community and subscribers of Law at the Margins. We got some desubscribers, meaning folks were not happy that Law at the Margins had hosted a conversation around BDS, around solidarity. So my question is, we're not going to agree on everything. We're not going to agree on strategy. We're not going to agree on tactic. We may have different political viewpoints. How do we keep ourselves unified while at the same time also accepting our political differences? And so just in terms of the immigrant rights context, Victor, this is your expertise. Since Trump is going after DACA students, there are many who say, well, let's protect DACA students and Dreamers and not the undocumented or not the individuals who have a criminal record. So already we see this divide and conquer strategy. So how do we counteract that? If we really want to build a broad-based solidarity movement, it seems to me that we have to figure out a way to contain or to have in our space different viewpoints and figure out a way that can be supportive, but at the same time respecting our differences. And I don't know if Victor, those who are on the chat want to share your thoughts on that. But maybe I'll start with Victor, and then I'll read comments from our attendees.
Well, I think, I mean, those are conversations we're having now here in Los Angeles. I do, you know, at the Labor Center, we do have a Dream Resource Center, so I work a lot with the undocumented young people and the young people that are struggling to maintain DACA. We've had these tough conversations about being united and not falling to this trap about that, you know, we get our issues peeled off and it divides us. And, you know, I just think we need to have these spaces where we can have these face-to-face dialogue. If we're separated by geographically, then we got to find mechanisms like we're doing right now to use different mechanisms to have dialogue, to talk about points of disunity or points of tensions as we move forward together. You know, I think we need to hold true to these principles of unity and making sure we support each other more than we ever have. Because I think what happens to a lot of campaigns is we agree to these principles, unities on the onset, but on the campaign, issues come up, messages are made, and then next thing you know is if the people involved with our campaigns, that, you know, their issues, their priority issues are no longer considered, and the outcome is always beneficial to some but not to all. So we need to get out of that mindset. I think it's too much at risk now with this administration. This is not the time where we need to proceed in that fashion. I think we just need to be honest, and we need to have good, courageous dialogue when it's needed, and not to put it aside for the sake of a campaign, and not to put it aside for the sake of moving forward. We need to redefine what we mean by compromise, and we need to redefine what we mean by objectives and outcomes. And we need to make sure that values and principles are never compromised. Those are easier said than done, but I think the face-to-face interaction, the way we interact and have courageous dialogue, courageous conversation to resolve these issues, knowing that we're never going to agree, and we're going to come from different ideological perspectives. But what we can agree is never to compromise so that there's a sector that doesn't benefit from an outcome, that we all need to fight together and win together in a way that it's inclusive, that benefits everybody.
Wait, Zakia, do you have any thoughts on how do we kind of work together to build this broad-based movement without dividing us? And just to share a recent example regarding the Muslim registry, I've been in conversation with the Muslim community where there have been some Muslims who said, let's not worry about it because we're not the radical ones, we're not the terrorists. And so, even without leaving your community, there's already division. So how do you kind of, build support across different issue areas?
Right. So, the first time when the registration was happening in 2000, right after 2001 Twin Tower attack, at that time I was a newcomer in California, and it didn't really affect the folks who are citizens or green card holders. It were for specific visa categories, and that's when I found out that not even within the Bangladeshi community, that majority are Muslim, right? There was no outcry, or people were not just paying too much attention to it. And it took a social justice advocate from a different city who was organizing all these informational meetings. They reached out to the Bangladeshis that, hey, do you guys have any need? And that's when I actually got introduced to a lot of the folks that I'm still in touch with in different areas. And so the division, like you said, Chaumtoli, is very real. It's, citizen versus non-citizens, and the elite professionals versus the, day laborers, whatnot. All those types of differences are there. However, I feel if our destination has to be the same, right? That understanding is we cannot compromise on. The destination needs to be the same. We can get there in many different routes. So if we are hoping to uphold human dignity, then that is not that is not something we can compromise on, and no advocate or activist can or should compromise on. So even within, we have to start from our own community education. Even now we see that a lot of solidarity events are happening for the say no to hate, and our cities should be sanctuaries. And not everybody is involved. Not everybody in the immigrant communities or all people of color, they're not involved because they feel it's not my issue. It's not happening to me. I have a secure livelihood. I'm not an undocumented person. In many cases, I'm not a Muslim, or I don't look like a Muslim. So I'm pretty safe, and I don't want to get involved. So I think this conversation, like Victor, you mentioned, is very important, more than ever, that we reach out beyond our comfort zones and get in touch with other activists who are working in some different manner. But again, the basic is the same. They are also for standing up for human rights, for human dignity, and making sure that people are not being discriminated against.
Great. At this point, I want to share some thoughts from Christopher Cox. He is based in Milwaukee, and he does work around garment workers and sort of the supply chain. I think the garment industry, and this is an area that is in my sort of wheelhouse, but so kind of thinking through fair trade, and that products that we purchase here, on the other end, is not made through either trafficked labor or forced labor, or just failure to pay or unsafe conditions. So I wish Christopher could share directly his campaign that he's sort of starting, and particularly because it comes out of a faith-based initiative. And this is something that theMargins is also going to be exploring in 2017, which will be really tricky, is how to navigate the social justice elements of faith-based places, but at the same time be very critical of the role that formalized institutions have played. So, so hopefully I'll do justice to Christopher and hopefully invite him to write a piece for theMargins. So part of what he was doing is to introduce a bill called the Business Supply Chain Transparency on Trafficking Slavery Act of 2015. So part of that, again, is to sort of eliminate trafficking and forced labor in the supply chain. And I guess because of the political context and landscape changing in the United States, whether or not that will be viable in the new administration, U.S. administration, remains to be seen. However, Christopher writes that he's hopeful in the sense that there are some female GOP sponsors who are opposed to trafficking, and so may sponsor this particular bill. So I don't know if we should, at this moment, we've focused a lot on the United States, and wonder if our attendees can chat and write on issues outside of the United States. Particularly in England, we had the Brexit exit, which then also alarmed us about whether or not we would have our own Brexit. Other issues outside of the United States is the Paris climate talks and climate justice. There's been so much movement around environmental justice and where that will go in light of US's appointments in the administration. So I don't know if there were other issues regarding also land rights, indigenous rights throughout outside of the United States. Of course, the most visible one was Standing Rock, which we will all witness, which was a temporary victory, which is a rerouting of this Dakota Access Pipeline. But it seems to me this is a broader issue about access to environmental resources that is not just happening in the United States, it's actually happening around the world. So Zakia or Victor and others would want to speak to any of those sort of non-US based issues.
I just wanted to mention that I believe that the refugee crisis is one of the worst of what's happening around the world right now, in Europe, in the Middle East, and also in my own backyard in Bangladesh, the Myanmar refugee crisis, which is not really attracting any international media attention or any type of relief work attention yet. So that's, I think that is a huge issue, and we really need to think about that, how we can, because that's happening right now. Yes, everything else, we have to keep on working on the climate change issue, absolutely. There is no option not to, but refugee crisis is happening now and today. And those people may not be around if we don't take the necessary steps. So for me, that is one of the biggest issues of 2016 that we saw unfold.
Great. Victor, do you want to add any of your thoughts around non-US, particularly Cuba? Yeah. The death of Fidel Castro and the changed Cuba relations is another area. Latin America has been sort of, again, the rejection of the peace agreements in Colombia are also some issues that were internationally talked about, maybe not.
I do solidarity work with, here at the Labor Center, we've been doing solidarity work with workers' rights groups in Mexico. They're organizing independent union struggles. In Canada, we do work in China, unions in China as well. And the challenge has been always with transnational solidarity work is sustainability and how to leverage how to find ways to leverage resources so that we can become more effective. And it's always a challenge, but I think we got to just figure out the better strategy, because I think there's a lot of international solidarity communication happening in a lot of conferences and convening. But our challenge is how to put that into action and how to create true cross-border organizing, transnational organizing that's going to push back against global capitalism and fight the issues that is impacting migration. But we do it in an international solidarity level that's effective. So I think that's going to be some of the challenges, but we need to strategize. I feel sometimes in international solidarity work, we do a good job of communication and connecting our issues together. But I think we got to figure out now the best strategy is to how to put it into action, to fight back and to win campaigns on a global level against corporate greed, against global capitalism, and against the United States. You know, we go into other countries, we need to fight back then with our brothers and sisters in those countries. And I think Cuba, the National Lawyers Guild has done a Cuba delegation. We do have spent a lot of time in Cuba. We're very concerned about the future. There's been some openness on the part of the Obama administration, and some doors have been opened to have better collaboration with the Cuban government and the Cuban people. But I think those doors are going to be shut down completely by Trump. And so we need to figure out how to create solidarity with Cuba, with the activists in Cuba who can work with us, and also Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, I consider, is a U.S. colony basically, and it's been a U.S. colony for many years. We call it a Commonwealth, but it's a colony, and so we need to figure out how to stand in line with the brothers and sisters of Puerto Rico and fight back, because I think Congress has just put a stranglehold in that economy that has made the economy of Puerto Rico very subservient now to the United States. And so I think, and I think we need to, the same way we're going to have to dismantle silos and come together on a domestic level, we're going to have to figure out the strategy of how to strengthen our transnational solidarity work in a way that we can push back, not just against global capitalism, but against this country and what this country does in other countries.
Great. So I think at this time, I'd like us to slowly focus. There's a lot to cover for 2016. So in terms of a question, is there an issue that we haven't talked about that is, you know, we are a law at the margins. So even amongst progressives, sometimes we have a little bit of myopia. In our past discussions in Law at the Margins in 2014, one of our attendees shared with us that most progressives do not focus around Native American and Indigenous people's rights. And it struck me that even I, as someone who tries to remain solidarity with lots of movements, even issues that I don't work on, that I needed to learn a lot about Native American organizing, and that's something that Law at the Margins has done in 2015 and has been working with frontline organizers in Standing Rock and then indigenous communities in Asia. So are there issues that we're ignoring? Are there erasures here that we should be focused on? This question is for attendees as well. Are there things that you're not hearing, even amongst progressives, amongst your allies? Christopher Cox raised a pretty an interesting point in a different context, but relevant here, is sometimes your allies take you for granted. And so I wanted to pose that question to Zakia and then Victor, and then have everyone think about what next for 2017 and begin to wind down our great conversation. Go ahead.
Well, I think now is a time that, as a movement, we need to redefine what we mean by the work for justice, and what we mean when we talk about solidarity and alliance building. I just think we need to redefine those concepts, and I think we need to define them based in the new reality that we face. And I think we need to have those dialogues. I think we're always fighting together. We're always in solidarity together. We're supporting each other. But what does it mean to really fight together in the realm of this new reality that we face? And that means that, you know, we're going to have to shift paradigms in how we do our work, how we approach the work of justice. I think we fight together, but we also need to learn together as well. And I think it's got to be an openness to learning. That's one of my lessons learned, for example, from, you know, the Standing Rock, the struggle by the Sioux Nation and the Water Protectors. Is it wasn't just showing solidarity for that struggle there, but it was like we need to learn more about the Native American culture in this country and the way that they fight back, and we can learn from that. Like, they can teach us a lot. And you know, I think sometimes we get so caught up in our own work that we think we know the strategy, we know the path to victory. But I think we just need to approach these fights too as a learning process, that in the struggle together, we're going to learn from each other. And I just think we need to redefine what it means to solidarity, what it means to fight together.
Do you have any thoughts about issues that we are not focusing on or you're not hearing that we should lift up?
No, I think there are a lot of issues, and possibly we will not be able to cover everything. I feel like the whole social justice movement, we have to redefine ourselves and think of we are like a mosaic, right? Pieces of a very big picture, and we can focus on our own issues, but do it in a way that doesn't harm the other side. Right? And a good example that comes to my mind when I think of it is, you know, liberation for women or women's rights movement. Why are they not involved in this Islamophobic attacks against women wearing hijab? Is that not a women's rights issue? It is a women's rights issue, right? Why wouldn't the women's rights movement be part of immigrant rights movement when we are talking about immigrant women being selected to enforce laws that are anti-abortion or anything like that, right? Why wouldn't they be involved in selective enforcement of law against immigrant community if it is impacting women's rights in many different ways? So I think we can be focusing on our own issues, but at the same time be mindful that is there something that I'm doing that may jeopardize the other movement, and whether I can do my work in a way that can add to or contribute towards that and not harm it. That way the competition is, like you were saying, we are almost like working against each other, divide and conquer, right? So we can be doing our work from our own space without affecting somebody else's work negatively. That's how I feel. And I think the last thing I would say is the name of this platform is Law at the Margins, right? So you already started that conversation of bringing these marginal groups to the center. And this is very important. These marginal groups that we don't see in everyday media conversations, everyday political speeches, these voices needs to be in the center. And that's what you're doing, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. So just some comments I just want to bring onto the video, but they're on the chat, and you can read that from Michelle Flores, which is, whether or not we need to be a little bit more aware of digital security, especially for marginalized communities, just because there's more of a reliance on using technology to do surveillance. Of course, those of us who read movement history know that surveillance has always been a part and parcel of social justice movements. But I think that the level of surveillance through technology, I think has increased. And I think something that we should think about for 2017 I know that there are a number of groups who are doing digital security trainings and to become more aware of that. The other comment I wanted to just share, and I don't know that we can, I know that I don't have an answer to it, maybe Victor Ozaki or others do. And again, I encourage everyone to share your thoughts on the chat box. The chat box gets kept as the transcript of this conversation. So even if you're not able to join because of the camera or mic on screen, your words don't get lost. So I definitely encourage you to write your thoughts and think about what next for 2017, because we're going to close with that. But Sharmeen Siddiqui, who runs a campaign called Justice for Shifa, and has a piece on Law at the Margins about her brother's entrapment post 9/11, talks about appreciating this conversation and that we can get above this fragmentation division. And it's difficult when we're in it to navigate that, but that she seems hopeful to be able to overcome those divisions. But one of the questions that I thought that she raised that's very powerful is that most of us now are living in the United States, or what many say, in the heart of the empire. So the question is, how can we have an internationalist, transnational, feminist solidarity framework if we are actually imagining that from the center of the empire? And when we talk about compromise, who are we compromising? Are we thinking about just the United States? Are we thinking about globally? For whom are we organizing? And when we do talk about transnational work, who is our constituency? You know, an organizer knows her base and knows her constituency. Who is the constituency of the organizer in a transnational internationalist framework? This is something that actually I think about all the time as someone who's committed to grassroots global solidarity in the field of labor. So for example, when American workers lose their jobs because of protectionism, but then workers in Bangladesh gain jobs, how do we have a labor framework that's really global? And then the other point that Sharmeen raises is, you know, the state now is expanding in terms of prison, military, and so how do we do this grassroots international work? So anyway, I don't know, Sharmeen, that we have answers for you, but I think the fact that you raise these questions, I think should make us pause and think through our strategies. And every strategy should have a component of who benefits, the SWOT, you know, strength, weakness, opportunities, threats, but I would add who is harmed, who is benefited, and back to Zakia's point and Victor's as well, is that we should think about, you know, a framework or a campaign that brings as many folks under the banner as possible. So thank you very much with this, and I guess that generated a lot of conversation. Lena shares that a broad framing of international struggles has been helpful. Reproductive justice will exist when all people exercise their rights and access resources they need to thrive and to decide it when and how to create their families with dignity, free of discrimination or violence. So we're going to slowly wind down. I'm going to ask Victor for some closing thoughts, and for those of you to share what should we do next. And then next, also, is there something that you would like Law at the Margins to be doing, and how we can support your work? So I'm going to give it over to Victor to sort of have some closing thoughts for 2017. And again, I encourage everyone to share your analysis, suggestions in the chat box. Contact us at Twitter at Law at the Margins. or just write to us. We're on Facebook as well. So Victor, just some closing thoughts for what do we do for 2017?
Yeah, so we're ending this year in a major state of crisis. And I think we're going to begin next year with challenges that we have never seen before for the work of justice. And I think part of it is, there was great insights today about solidarity, alliance building, really never compromising anyone involved with the work with justice. We have to win together. It has to be inclusive. There has to be an intersectionality of all the different campaigns together, all the different struggles, all the different pieces of it. We just need to we need to be able now to engage in strong radical solidarity building and also sustainability. We're going to be in this for a long fight. We have a long fight ahead of us. So we always have to find time to have courageous conversations and check in with each other all throughout all the different struggles. And I think that's how we're going to win this. We're going to win the major challenges that lie ahead. I think our crisis is opportunities. And I think we have opportunities to strengthen ourselves as activists, to dismantle the silos that currently exist, and to engage in courageous spaces where we do learn from each other and we learn how to resolve whatever conflicts and disagreements that we encounter along the way, which makes us a much stronger as a social justice movement. So I'm actually looking forward to that piece, because I think if we do all those pieces and we move forward together in that spirit of radical solidarity, I think we can take on the Donald Trumps of the world and be able to overcome them.
Great. So we're going to slowly close our session, and I always am thankful for Victor for always looking at having us sort of take courageous conversations, but do that gently and with kindness and compassion for each other. And so, and I think that as we build this sort of international movement, I think we're going to have missteps along the way, and sort of building a community that's really compassionate to each other, I think is going to be critical. It is impossible to talk about everything in a little over an hour and every single issue. These are just flashpoints for 2016. And one of the things I do want to mention that did not come up to one of our attendees, Beth, had asked questions about children's rights issues. And so what I would suggest is, if there are issues that you are passionate about, that you would like to see, reach out to us. So again, I cannot stress enough that Law at the Margins is a platform for you, for social justice activists, lawyers, and organizers. And I firmly believe that we can create a space where we can share our respective ideas. And so if we hear from you on webinars to have, articles to write, issues to lift up, I'm committed, and Michelle Flores is on our board, as well as Victor, to lift up grassroots issues. So I encourage you to reach out to us so that we can maybe do some programming for 2017. I am very thankful for everyone for joining. I'm thankful for Zakia for hanging in there and answering a lot of questions about her work, Islamophobia, gender. For everyone who attended and shared their thoughts on this chat. This format was intentional, and I suspect it was something that people are not used to. People want to hop onto a webinar and look for experts. And so Law at the Margins thinks that each of you are experts. We're all experts in movement building work. And so we want to create a space for your work to be lifted up. And not have a panel format. And I hope that this becomes the format that movement folks use in 2017 to move away from this idea that somehow lawyers are experts, organizers are experts, and people are the most experts of their own lives, and we're committed to facilitating that. So for 2017, we will be committed to international solidarity work. Thankful to everyone. Thankful to Albert Garcia, who's our behind the scenes content producer. And we're going to sign off. I don't see any more comments, but see you on Facebook and Twitter. And you can also email me at law@themargins@gmail.com for any program ideas. Again, thank you all and have a good afternoon, good night, depending on whichever time zone you are at. Take care.
Thank you, Betty.
Bye.
Thank you.
Going off air.
Bye.